Come on in, welcome to my home. So, how exactly do you expect this to get done? That's one of the questions you're going to find yourself asking a lot, and I mean a lot. And I realize that this came up for a few different reasons. And it all happened since, of course, Mom's break. When Mom took that fall and took that break, it changed how she did things and who did them. And a lot of it's ended up me doing it, which is absolutely okay, but it also ended up me doing a lot of things which I normally wouldn't do, which has become its own interesting thing. So now every time something happens, I always have to ask myself, how exactly do you expect that to get done? Things like cleaning, making the bed, those sort of things, those are pretty normal things. I mean, you can expect that those things need to be done, so you don't think much about them getting done because it's in your normal trajectory. The floor needs swept, you sweep the floor. The bed needs made, you made the bed. You can expect that those things are going to need done, but not everything needs to be done. So my mom's church group has this wonderful thing where what they do is they knit shawls for people they're prayer shawls. They knit shawls for people who are in hospitals and those sort of things. And she is an avid knitter. I mean, she's knitted hundreds and hundreds of these shawls, which I think is great and wonderful. But there's a new problem. To get these shawls to the people in hospitals, in retirement homes, in nursing homes, they have to get to one person who takes them to the homes. I'm like, okay, well that's great. So instead of knitting a whole bunch of shawls at once and then taking them, she likes to take the shawl, as she always did once she was done knitting, to the person who then distributes them. Well, that's interesting because she can knit maybe 2-3 shawls a week. So 2 or 3 times a week we have to take a shawl to a person who will then distribute it. We don't even really have contact with that person. We just have to drive the about 10 minutes across town, drop the shawl off, and drive back. Not bad, except that's 20 minutes. When you multiply that 20 minutes in, it suddenly becomes 1 hour in the week is taken up just with getting these shawls going the way that it goes. And so I said, well, why don't we just wait until you get a whole bunch done and then deliver them? Well, that's not the way she always did it, and she wants to do it how she always did it. That becomes its own problem. I mean, once again, I asked myself, well, how is this going to get done? So I have a wonderful family who's been vastly concerned about how Mom is doing, which I think is great. They call about and ask about her, at least twice a week, sometimes more. I have a cousin who every day asks about how Mom is doing, and I really want to give more and more updates. But the question becomes, how does this get done? Because the other night, everybody got a hold of me to ask how Mom was doing. So I then kept repeating all of these things. And you're like, well, why didn't you just put it in one big email? Well, it's because everybody's on a different social media. Nobody's on the same social media or getting a hold of people. And so it became one of those issues where it was like, I'm now telling everybody the exact same thing. And even in those 5 to 10 minutes it takes for that conversation, when you multiply that with the fact that I have 4 cousins, I have a brother, and in one day I think I talked to my cousins and everybody, and it was like really sweet that they all got a hold of me and wanted to know how they were doing. But that's almost an hour again of telling the same information. And some things people really do need to know. I need to get a hold of people to especially like my brother, to let him know exactly what's going on. And so once again, that becomes one of those, okay, that's good, but that's going to take up a lot of time, which is already, as we've talked about before, the amount of time that it takes to actually take care of somebody can be intense. So when you add out spreading out all this information, which does need to get out. Don't get me wrong, it needs to get out. But I have to find a better way of getting the information out because It really does. So I'm looking into different ways of getting that information out to people so that that can free me up to actually do more things which need to be done, so mom isn't trying to decide to climb up on a ladder because she wants to have the curtains changed for whatever reason. I think summer's coming. So every year, twice a year, we have a family get-together. And now with restrictions being loosened up and most of us being vaccinated, we can actually start planning our family get-together. Which, on the surface, is not a big problem, but underneath, it can be. Because what happens is, usually my brother and his wife and my nephew come down. That's really cool. Then all the other family comes in and we all have it. I think we usually have it over at our facility around here. But what the problem is you have to remember is I am still doing, because mom's already planning on when this is going to happen, I'm still doing everything which I would normally do for me. Then everything which she would normally do, I'm still going to have to do because she cannot lift things. Then everything for that get-together that she would do for the get-together has to be done by me. And what she was, because she was talking about how great it'll be and how she's going to get all these decorations, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. How is that going to work out? Because if I'm actually doing, like, normally doing her, getting her breakfast, doing her food and all of those fun things, and then adding in the fact that everybody's in for the weekend, unless everybody else is in taking up the responsibilities of the things which still need to be done, because like I said, I still have things to do here. This becomes a whole, that can't happen, because all that does is that puts all the work of one weekend onto me. And I'm now to the point where I've done this a lot, where I've been like, well, no, this isn't right. This can't be. Now, my cousins have been really good about saying the whole, and they told her, well, we'll just jump in and we'll bring everything. We don't want you to do anything. The problem actually is her. She wants to do the whole, well, I want to do this because this is what I've always done. And trying to explain that, it can be very hard to try to explain that to somebody who's always done something, that they can't do it, and all they're doing is lumping on all the responsibility and all the work onto someone else. That can be a problem. A big problem. I'm also finding that even simple tasks, which I'm not supposed to be involved with whatsoever, end up involving me. Just this moment before, what was going to be a simple task of mom was going to dust her house. I'm like, fine, cool, I'll come over and run the vacuum in a few minutes. Ended up, I get over there, and suddenly she's like, well, I need help with the mop. And I'm like, mop for what? So suddenly, the kitchen floor and then the other floors had to be also mopped. And I'm like, really hadn't planned on this in my schedule, but okay. And then it moved on from there. It wasn't just that the floors needed to be mopped. Well, there's something wrong with, she has one of those spray nozzle mop things and it wasn't working. And of course, when I worked it, it was working fine. And I'm like, this is what happens. Things which you don't think are going to take any time are going to take a lot of time, and you have to build that in. You have to think about the things that, how is it going to get done? Because even though you say to yourself, well, this is not going to involve me, it's inevitably going to involve me. Now, people who are parents are saying, well, I understand what that's like. Well, yeah and no. The part of the problem is, your kids don't come into this with planned expectations. Your kids don't come into this with, this is the way I do things, this is the way I've always done things, this is the way things are done. And then when you don't do them that way because, well, there's evidence that shows that that's not the way things are done, or things have changed, they don't have anything to fall back on the whole, well, that's how we're going to do it because I said that's how we do things. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. There are lots and lots of times where volunteering, and that's what's happening a lot around here, where mom will volunteer to do something, and it doesn't ever end up her doing it. It ends up me doing it. And so that's why I stick with the whole, well, how is that going to get done? How are you volunteering to do something actually even include you doing something? What was interesting is this morning was she did a doctor's appointment. And I knew the doctor's appointment was coming up, so I made sure that she knew all of the schedules that we had, so that way it was really easy for her to do the whole, hey, I need to have because she needs to get her eye checked, because after she fell, she still hasn't had that eye checked. So she could very easily do this. So a lot of times you can head off a lot of these problems by making sure everybody knows what's going on. And a lot of that's going to be, that's why I use, don't be thrown around, but that's why I use my calendar. Everything that we have is on that calendar, and I put it on right away. I will stop what I'm doing so that I can put it on right away, so that way everybody knows what's going on, and there is no, well, I volunteered us to do this, so you need to do this, even though you don't have the time to do that. That's also meaning that you have to put on your own things on there, especially when it comes time to taking care of yourself, which I'm going to do a whole nother video on, so don't panic about that. But realistically, look at how long it takes to do something. Look at, can it get done? And don't let other people volunteer you to do something that you know you don't have time for. Or if they do, guess what? You can say no. That's really important to remember. The other thing to remember is don't guilt trip yourself into doing everything, because it's really easy to blame everybody else for getting you to do stuff, but a lot of times we do it to ourselves. We say, well, I'm the person who's here, so I should be the one who's doing it. Or I'm the person who's taking care of said person or whatever. I'm the one who should be doing these extra things. And it's just like, well, no, you shouldn't, because you might be the one who has the least amount of free time. And that's something to remember. What people think you have and what you think you have of free time might be total fiction. And a lot of people don't ever add that up. They don't ever look at this and say, well, no, I don't have that kind of free time, so I can't do that. Or even worse, they say, well, I don't have that free time, well, I can give up something which I need to do or I want to do, and I can do it, make that sacrifice, because if I don't do it, nobody will. That is a really tough call. The infamous, well, if I don't do it, nobody will. Because sometimes there's a reason nobody will do it, because a lot of times these nobody will do it means it doesn't need to be done. Or it does need to be done, but maybe you are the absolute wrong person to do it. That is really something to think about. And feel no guilt about hiring somebody to do stuff that you need to do. One of the things that we're going to talk about when it comes to the finances of being a caregiver is making sure that you aren't paying for everything, because that is one of the instinctual things that caregivers have a tendency to do, is to just be like, well, I'll go ahead and pay for it. Now, if you're in one of these positions where it is one of those financial kind of things where people have come to you, yeah, you might end up doing it. But if it's not, it's one of those things where you have to think about the whole, if I can't do it, and it really isn't my responsibility to get it done, why am I paying for having it done? That is a real big question, and it's a lot of times people in general are expecting you to do it because you're the responsible one, so you should be paying for it. So that is its own big issue. You see this a lot with people taking people places. The infamous, well, I had my friend take me someplace, so I gave them money for gas. Well, I had you drive me 400 miles, but I'm not going to give you anything. Well, no, I wouldn't have gone those 400 miles. You have to really look at that and say to yourself, am I taking on a responsibility that I just shouldn't? But think a lot about how is this going to get done before you say anything about, yeah, I'll be the one to do it. Because maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should hire it out, maybe you should just let somebody else do it. Maybe you should just give up control and let the person who you are taking care of actually take care of it themselves. Because a lot of times if you don't, they're going to start giving up more and more responsibility, which means they're going to stop doing some of the things which they really could do themselves simply because it's hard. Well, yeah, it is sort of hard, and it's hard to watch somebody struggle at doing something, but sometimes you have to let them struggle so that they can prove to themselves that they can do it, and then it gets easier and easier for them to do it once again. This also has to hold true for resources. Resources are another thing that people love to volunteer your resources for. Not just your time, but your actual stuff. The infamous, well, you can just borrow or you can just use this, even though that is not that person's. You really need to sit down and have the conversation, I would say at the start of the week, how things are going to get done, who's going to do them, when, where, why, what. That whole entire thing needs to be spelled out. And you can't let the person who you're caring for then decide, I'm just going to change this whole thing because this isn't, it's just like, well, no, we have discussed this, we have said when this is going to happen, and this really is why it needs to happen, how it needs to happen. Because, I mean, we just went through this, the infamous just a few seconds ago. The reason, I mean, you might not know this, but all of these videos are being done like throughout this entire day because it was the infamous Mom was just going to dust. She has this nice little dusting thing, so that's no problem. Then the next thing it was, well, I need to run the vacuum, and I just got her one of these little vacuums that you'll see me do a video for sometime later. And it's really lightweight and everything, so that's no problem. So I'm like, okay. And then she started using it. She couldn't figure out how to use it, so I had to show her how to use it. And as I'm trying to show her how to use it, I'm noticing that, well, she tried to use it earlier, but she had somehow knocked it over and the battery had come out. So I was like, well, that's really weird. And of course she didn't fess up to that until I had to spend 5 to 10 minutes trying to figure out why it wasn't working. Then it became, she had decided that where I had placed the dog food wasn't where she wanted it. She wanted it at the end of the counter so that when I picked up the vacuum, it knocked over the dog food. And it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. And so we just had this whole problem because little things get knocked on, and it's just one of those, hey, I do understand that this is how you normally do this, but it isn't going to work right now. We need to do this way because, and it's a problem. It's an actual problem. But it's something that you're going to have to work through. You're going to have to figure out, how can I make this so that it actually works and it actually is successful. So I'm not going to stay on here very much longer because I need to get back over there and see if we can fix things out. Because right now neither one of us is all that happy, simply because it was one of those easy, well, I can go ahead and do it, and she couldn't. She couldn't go ahead and do it. She decided her limitations were something imaginary, and it's just like, well, no, every time you do that, someone has to come back through, someone has to fix it, and right now that is me as I'm trying to do something completely different. And that's the whole big thing about the whole, well, how exactly is that going to get done? So yeah, it's something to think about. Well, let me know down in the comments what you think about that. I know most of these videos are not going to be this negative. This one came out a little bit out of left field because of what was happening this day, right now. But it is really something you have to think about. Really, think about it. How are you going to get that done?